experienced before.
Exactly.
And when you come out of a deep, deep darkness, your joy and your happiness is different.
And everybody sees that.
And you measure it different, and it shows different because of the darkness that you've been through.
Yeah.
It comes out different, and you appreciate.
The shocking truth behind Joni Lamb and Doug Weiss has finally been exposed. For years, rumors have swirled around their controversial relationship and secrets within the Daystar network, but now Rodney Howard steps forward with the truth that no one saw coming. What has been hidden for so long is finally out in the open, and it's shaking the foundation of Christian media. You won't believe what has been uncovered. Brace yourself for the jaw-dropping revelations. Stay tuned to find out what's really going on behind the scenes. After Marcus Lamb's death in 2021, Joni Lamb found herself in an incredibly difficult position. She was suddenly faced with the responsibility of leading Daystar television network, a ministry her late husband had co-founded and run for years. Marcus had been the public face of the network, a strong leader and the driving force behind its success. His passing left a huge hole, not only in the ministry, but in Joni's personal life. She was grieving the loss of her partner, and at the same time, she had to step up and fill shoes no one expected her to fill. Many people sympathized with Joni, understanding that grief is complicated and everyone heals in their own way. But there was a noticeable undercurrent of skepticism about how quickly she was moving forward. It hadn't been long since Marcus passed, and some felt that Joni was rushing into things too fast. The public watched her closely, and when Joni started a relationship with Doug Weiss, a Christian counselor with a somewhat controversial past, it raised eyebrows. To many, it seemed like Joni was moving on too quickly, and they questioned whether she was ready to take on such a big commitment so soon after losing her husband. It wasn't just her family and the public that had concerns. Even her children, who had lost their father, struggled with the idea of their mother starting a new relationship. For them, it felt like she hadn't fully processed her grief before diving into something new. It wasn't just a personal issue anymore. It was a leadership issue too. As the face of Daystar, Joni's decisions affected the entire network. The quick progression of her relationship with Doug, coupled with her new leadership role, created a clash with the values Daystar had always promoted: faith, commitment, and family. The scrutiny on Joni's personal life was intense. She wasn't just a widow dealing with her emotions. She was the head of a major Christian ministry, and every decision she made was under a microscope. There was an expectation that she would grieve for a certain amount of time before even considering moving on. But grief isn't something that follows a set timeline, and for Joni, her personal journey of healing was different from what others might have expected. She believed that her relationship with Doug was part of God's plan for her healing, even if it came earlier than some thought was appropriate. In the midst of her grief, Joni was trying to navigate not only the emotional complexities of losing Marcus, but also the pressure of leading a major ministry. She was constantly pulled in different directions, trying to honor Marcus's legacy, handle her grief, and deal with the media and public's judgment. It was a heavy weight to carry, and Joni's personal life, now on display for the world to see, made everything feel much harder. It wasn't just about her healing anymore. It was about proving she could still lead Daystar with integrity and grace. The balance was nearly impossible, and every step she took seemed to be met with criticism or doubt.
The things that are being said, even to the point of people saying that probably I killed Marcus in the hospital because I was having an affair, blah, blah, blah. And Rodney Howard Brown got mixed up talking to you and told Jimmy that Doug was texting me or sexting me. He never sexted me. He is a pure man. We didn't have sex till we got married. That he was sexting me in January after Marcus died in November is a complete lie. Well, Jonathan knows that. But the lie was perpetuated because Rodney went and told other people and other people. That's the damage that you've done to me. And the damage that you've done to a godly man who has integrity and is known for his integrity.
The financial troubles at Daystar Television Network became a massive issue after the scandals surrounding Joni Lamb and Doug Weiss started to grow. Daystar had been one of the biggest Christian television networks in the world, built on a foundation of faith, trust, and the support of millions of viewers. For years, the network had operated on the idea that the donations from its loyal audience were being used responsibly to spread the gospel, support Christian programming, and help those in need. But when the rumors and allegations about financial mismanagement began to surface, everything changed. One of the first major red flags for many people was the purchase of a private jet by Daystar. On the surface, it seemed like an extravagant and unnecessary expense for a ministry that was built on donations. Joni Lamb, however, defended the purchase. saying it was essential for the ministry's global outreach. She explained that having a private jet would allow Daystar leaders to travel quickly and efficiently for speaking engagements, conferences, and mission trips. It made sense in a way. Many large ministries and organizations, even outside the Christian world, owned private jets for similar reasons. But for many of Daystar's supporters, this justification didn't sit right. The backlash to the jet purchase was swift. Supporters who had donated money, believing it would go towards the ministry's core mission, felt betrayed. Many had given out of a deep sense of faith, trusting that their donations would help spread the gospel, not fund luxury purchases. The timing of the jet's purchase made things worse. This wasn't a time when Daystar was thriving financially. Donations were already down, and many other ministries were struggling to stay afloat. So for many, the idea that Daystar was spending so much money on a jet felt like a slap in the face. The controversy didn't stop with the jet. Rumors started to spread about other extravagant purchases made by the network, fueled by whispers of funds being used improperly. Allegations emerged that large sums of money were being transferred to offshore accounts. People began to question how donations were being allocated, and the more they questioned, the deeper the doubts became. There was a growing sense that Daystar, once a symbol of faith and humility, had shifted its focus. The network was now accused of spending money on luxury items, which didn't seem to align with the values it had once preached. It wasn't just the public who began to raise concerns. Within Daystar itself, there was a growing sense of unease. As the media picked up on the story, more and more people started to ask questions about the integrity of the ministry's leadership. The very foundation that Daystar had been built on, faith, trust, and financial stewardship, was suddenly in question. Joni Lamb, as the public face of Daystar, found herself in the middle of a storm. She tried to defend the decisions being made, insisting that everything was in line with the ministry's mission, but the damage had already been done. To many, her justifications seemed defensive, and the trust that had been built over years of ministry work began to erode. The financial concerns didn't just hurt Daystar's public image, they directly impacted the network's bottom line. Donations, which had once flowed in steadily from loyal supporters, began to dwindle. Some donors, feeling like their money had been misused, pulled back their contributions. The financial strain became a real issue for Daystar. The ministry had relied heavily on its supporters to fund its programming and global outreach, and now that funding was in jeopardy. Without those donations, the network found itself facing the very real possibility of having to cut back on its operations. As the financial scandal grew, it became clear that the backlash wasn't just about the private jet or rumors of offshore accounts. It was about a larger issue: trust. Daystar had built its reputation on the belief that it was a ministry dedicated to serving God and its community, not to making a profit or living in luxury. The accusations that the ministry was mismanaging funds cast a shadow over everything the network had stood for. Many began to ask, how could a ministry that preached humility and stewardship be involved in such questionable financial practices? The allegations about financial mismanagement were troubling on a deeper level. They raised serious questions about the integrity of the leadership at Daystar, including Joni Lamb. As the widow of Marcus Lamb, Joni had taken on a leadership role that many people didn't think she was ready for, and now her leadership was being called into question because of the financial issues. Some supporters felt that Joni had lost touch with the values that had made Daystar successful in the first place. Her personal decisions, especially her relationship with Doug Weiss, were now intertwined with the financial troubles, making it difficult for some people to separate the personal from the professional. The media's coverage of the financial scandal was relentless. News outlets jumped on every new development, often reporting on rumors and leaks rather than hard facts. This fueled public speculation, and the situation grew more chaotic by the day. Some people defended Joni, arguing that the investigation was unfair and that she had been a strong leader for many years. Others, however, felt that the scandal was a wake-up call for Christian ministries in general. If Daystar, one of the most well-known Christian networks, could be involved in such financial mismanagement, what did that say about other ministries? As the financial crisis continued, Joni found herself trying to defend not only her personal decisions, but also the very integrity of the ministry she had helped build. She had spent years working to establish Daystar as a trusted and respected network, but now it seemed like all of that work was unraveling in front of her eyes. The financial concerns, combined with the personal backlash, left Joni feeling overwhelmed. She was trying to navigate grief, handle a public relations nightmare, and keep the ministry afloat all at once. It was an incredibly difficult position to be in, and it seemed like there was no easy way out. The financial mismanagement scandal at Daystar exposed deep flaws within the organization's operations and leadership. It wasn't just about a few bad financial decisions. It was about a breakdown in trust between the ministry and its supporters. Daystar had been a beacon of hope for millions, and now its reputation was in tatters. The public's perception of the network shifted, and people began to question whether it was still a legitimate ministry, or just another business masquerading as a faith-based organization. For Joni, this was a crisis of faith and leadership. She had to face the painful reality that her leadership was being judged not only on her personal life, but on the financial decisions being made within Daystar. The financial problems at Daystar were more than just numbers. They were a reflection of the larger issue of trust in religious organizations. Joni's defense of Daystar's spending decisions only deepened the divide. To some, she seemed out of touch with the values the ministry had once represented. To others, she was doing her best in an impossible situation, and they believed she deserved a chance to rebuild. In the end, the financial scandal at Daystar became a turning point for the network. The allegations of financial mismanagement, the rumors of offshore accounts, and the questionable purchases shook the very foundation of the ministry. For Jonilamb and Daystar, the road to recovery would be long and difficult. Rebuilding trust, restoring the network's reputation, and addressing the financial concerns would require a massive effort and a renewed commitment to the values that Daystar had once represented. Whether Daystar could come back from this crisis and rebuild its relationship with its supporters remained to be seen. But it was clear that the network's future depended on how it responded to these allegations and how it regained the trust it had lost. As the scandal surrounding Daystar television network began to unfold, the public and media scrutiny of Jonilamb and Doug Weiss intensified rapidly. What started as whispers about financial mismanagement soon grew into a full-blown media storm. Joni, who had been thrust into an incredibly difficult position after the death of her husband, Marcus Lamb, now found herself in the center of a controversy that was no longer just about the ministry's finances. It had become personal, and every detail of her life, from her relationship with Doug to her leadership of Daystar, was being put under a microscope. The media quickly picked up on the story, and soon the network and its leadership were the subject of intense public scrutiny. The media frenzy began with the allegations surrounding the purchase of a private jet for Daystar. For many, this was an uncomfortable image, especially when they had been donating money with the belief that it was being used to spread the gospel and help those in need. The purchase, which Joni defended as necessary for the ministry's global outreach, only seemed to fuel the fire. The media took every opportunity to spin the story, with some outlets accusing Daystar of using donations for luxury items instead of its mission. Reporters dug into every financial detail they could find, and what was initially a discussion about a single purchase soon became an investigation into the broader financial practices of the network. The rumors of offshore accounts and financial mismanagement were picked up by every major news outlet, making it impossible for Joni to escape the negative press. But it wasn't just the financial aspect that grabbed the public's attention. The media became fixated on Joni's personal life, particularly her relationship with Doug Weiss, which had developed very quickly after Marcus's death. Joni had been married to Marcus for decades, and his sudden death left her not only grieving, but suddenly in charge of a global ministry. The speed at which she entered a new relationship with Doug, a Christian counselor with a controversial past, seemed to many like a sign that she wasn't properly grieving, or worse, that she was using her grief as a way to move on too quickly. The media didn't hesitate to use her personal life as a tool to fuel the growing scandal. As Joni's relationship with Doug became more public, it stirred up a mix of emotions in both her supporters and critics. Some saw it as a sign of healing, a way for Joni to find new hope and love after the devastating loss of her husband. They argued that grief doesn't follow a set timeline, and Joni's decision to move forward was her own. But for others, particularly those who had watched Daystar grow under Marcus and Joni's leadership, the relationship seemed to undermine the values they had come to associate with the network. To many, it felt like Joni was not only moving on too fast, but was also disregarding the emotional weight of her late husband's legacy. The media amplified these divisions, painting the situation as one where Joni's personal choices were in direct conflict with the values Daystar had once stood for. The situation became even more complex when the media began to report on the tension within Joni's family. Joni's children, who had lost their father just a short time before, were understandably struggling with the idea of their mother moving on so quickly. For them, it wasn't just about seeing their mother find new love. It was about feeling like they hadn't had enough time to properly grieve. The media latched onto this, making it a key part of the narrative. The Lamb family's internal struggles were now being broadcast to the world, and it only added fuel to the fire. To some, it seemed like the Lamb family was falling apart, and the future of Daystar was uncertain. The media coverage, while relentless, also began to divide public opinion. On one side, there were those who defended Joni and Doug. These supporters argued that Joni had done nothing wrong in seeking happiness again, and that grief was a deeply personal journey. They pointed out that she had been under unimaginable stress, both personally and professionally, and that it was unfair to judge her so harshly. They believed that Joni's leadership of Daystar, combined with her strong faith, was what mattered most, and the media's focus on her relationship with Doug was an unfair distraction. These supporters rallied around Joni, defending her decisions and criticizing the media for sensationalizing the story. On the other side, however, there were those who saw the entire situation as a reflection of larger issues within Christian ministries. To these critics, the scandal wasn't just about Joni's personal life, it was about the integrity of Daystar as a whole. They argued that the network's focus had shifted from its original mission to something more self-serving. The quick progression of Joni's relationship with Doug, combined with the financial mismanagement allegations, led many to question whether Daystar had become too focused on maintaining its image rather than fulfilling its religious mission. The critics pointed out that the ministry had built its reputation on values like humility, faith, and generosity, and they felt that those values were being compromised. As the media coverage continued, it wasn't just about public opinion anymore, it became a battle of narratives. Some outlets took a more sympathetic approach, painting Joni as a woman caught in an impossible situation. Others were more critical, suggesting that her leadership had faltered and that her decisions were damaging the reputation of Daystar. Social media played a massive role in amplifying these conflicting narratives. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram exploded with opinions, with people who had once been loyal Daystar viewers expressing their disappointment and anger over what had happened. Many felt that their trust had been betrayed, not just by the financial mismanagement, but by what they saw as a disregard for the values they had come to associate with Daystar. On the other hand, there were still those who defended Joni, arguing that she had been a faithful leader for years and that she deserved time to heal. The media frenzy grew worse as the public's perception of Joni and Daystar continued to shift. Some began to question whether Daystar could ever recover from the scandal, especially when it was now being scrutinized for every decision, both personal and professional. Joni was no longer just a widow dealing with grief. She was a public figure whose every move was being watched. The weight of this intense scrutiny made it difficult for her to maintain any sense of normalcy. It was as if the more she tried to defend herself, the worse the situation became. The media's portrayal of her as someone who was mismanaging her ministry and making questionable personal decisions only fueled the growing divide between her supporters and her critics. At the same time, the media coverage started to affect the broader Christian media landscape. Daystar had once been a leader in faith-based television, but now it was being portrayed as an example of everything that was wrong with the Christian media industry. The focus on wealth, power, and personal gain seemed to overshadow the message of faith and service that had once been Daystar's core. For many people, the scandal was a stark reminder of how easily trust could be broken and how fragile the reputation of faith-based organizations could be. In the end, the public and media scrutiny surrounding Jonilamb and Daystar reached a boiling point. The media circus surrounding the scandal exposed the vulnerabilities of Christian ministries and showed how quickly public opinion could shift when trust was broken. Joni was faced with the painful reality that her personal life, her leadership, and her ministry were all under intense scrutiny. The media's relentless pursuit of the story made it nearly impossible for her to escape the negativity, and the pressure continued to mount as Daystar's financial and reputational troubles deepened. The situation became more than just a personal issue. It was a reflection of larger questions about the role of Christian ministries in the public eye, the expectations placed on religious leaders, and the consequences of losing trust. The crisis of trust surrounding Daystar television network became impossible to ignore as the scandal continued to unfold. Once a symbol of Christian faith and integrity, Daystar now faced questions about its financial practices, leadership decisions, and the values it had once promoted. For years, the network had relied on the loyalty and generosity of its viewers, who donated with the belief that their contributions would go towards spreading the gospel and supporting the ministry's mission. But as allegations of financial mismanagement, including the controversial purchase of a private jet, spread across the media, many donors began to pull back. The trust that had been built over decades was now in jeopardy, and the ministry's future seemed uncertain. Joni Lamb, now the face of Daystar after Marcus Lamb's death, found herself in a difficult position. Her leadership was under intense scrutiny, not just because of her personal decisions, but also because of the network's financial troubles. People started questioning whether Daystar was still the faith-driven organization it had once been, or if it had become more focused on maintaining an image of wealth and power. As financial donations dwindled and support from other Christian organizations began to fade, the ministry's survival was at risk. The situation became a critical test of whether Daystar could recover from the damage done. The public backlash, combined with internal tensions within the Lamb family, left Joni feeling the weight of the crisis. She had spent years building Daystar alongside Marcus, but now the foundation of trust that had supported the network for so long was crumbling. Every decision she made, from her relationship with Doug Weiss to how the ministry's funds were managed, was being closely examined. The criticism of her leadership and the allegations of financial mismanagement were a constant reminder of how fragile Daystar's reputation had become. For many supporters, the scandal wasn't just about the money. It was about the values Daystar represented. People had supported the network because they believed it was more than just a media outlet. It was a ministry that stood for faith, integrity, and the mission of spreading the gospel. The financial troubles and the questions surrounding Joni's personal life made many wonder if the ministry had lost sight of those values. The trust that had been carefully built over the years felt like it was slipping away, and with it, the future of Daystar. The question on everyone's mind was whether Daystar could ever regain its former prominence. Could Joni and the network's leadership rebuild the trust that had been shattered? It would take more than just public relations campaigns or promises to do so. The crisis demanded transparency, accountability, and a genuine commitment to the values that had once made Daystar a trusted and respected ministry. Without these, the network's future seemed uncertain. Rebuilding trust wouldn't be easy. It would require Joni to demonstrate that Daystar was truly focused on its original mission and not driven by personal or financial gain. She would have to confront the tough questions about the network's financial decisions, including the purchase of the jet, and work to restore the relationship with donors who felt betrayed. The road to recovery would be long, but if Daystar was going to survive, it would have to prove to its supporters that it could live up to the values it had once preached. Only then could the network begin to regain the trust it had lost and work toward a future that was true to its faith-driven mission.